It's Wednesday night, and we are in the subject of prophecy. We've been on this subject for years. I spent 4.5 years on the book of Revelation on Sunday night, and we still didn't finish it. And people say, how in the world can you spend 4.5 years on the book of Revelation? Well, we try to define every word in the book, every culture, every custom in the book, and it really doesn't have anything to do with what most so-called Bible scholars say that it has to do with. But we're talking about prophecy and how it began and what is it about. It's not just about the end times. Prophecy is about Israel and about their time period as a nation. They were a nation from 1 Samuel through 2 Chronicles. 2 Chronicles, that's the time period that they were a kingdom under kings. When you look at this chart of the kings right here, this is the time period that they were kings. In fact, when you see Saul, the first king of Israel, and you can actually put right beside his name 1 Samuel, the 8th chapter, and the 8th chapter through the 15th chapter as far as God was concerned. 8 through 15 would be God's recognition of Saul. And of course, all the way through the rest of the book, God considers David king from the 16th chapter to the 31st chapter of 1 Samuel. And I always call 1 Samuel the book. 1 Samuel is the book of Saul and David because this is a battle that they're having over who's going to be the king. Of course, it's not a battle as far as God is concerned because God has David anointed to be king. And Saul is out as of the 15th chapter because he doesn't do the things that God says. Well, everything that happens during this time period, 1 Samuel through 2 Chronicles, 1 and 2 Samuel, 1 and 2 Kings, 1 and 2 Chronicles, these 6 books, the Jews call the books of the kings. Now, what's the difference in these books? Well, in 1 Samuel, the only time you have an account of Saul chasing David, trying to kill him, is in 1 Samuel. You actually have 2 Samuel, you'll find the beginning of 2 Samuel in 2 Chronicles. You'll find in the book of Samuel, you'll find 1 Chronicles, 1 Chronicles, the 11th chapter. So 2 Samuel through 2 Kings, 2 Samuel through 2 Kings. 1 Samuel stands by itself. It stands alone among these books. I'm trying to get you to understand some things about the books. 1 Samuel stands alone because this is a time period of where Samuel is some say he was the 13th judge right before Samuel. Samuel was the mouth of God upon the earth, one of the most important prophets that lived in all of the Bible. And that's because before Samuel, you go back to the book of Judges, you go back to Judges, and they were under judges. Israel's under judges for about 300 years. They were under kings for approximately, and you have to start the kings at 2 Samuel, the 8th chapter. Actually, the 9th chapter, because the 8th chapter is where the people said, we're sick and tired of not having a king like the other people around us. Samuel, you got 2 wicked sons, and they're going to be set up to be the prophets in Israel, and they're going to lead Israel astray. And then if you back up to 1 Samuel, the 2nd chapter, and the high priest of Israel was Eli, and he had some wicked sons. He had 2 wicked sons, Hophni and Phinehas. And Israel said, we're tired of men ruling us. The rule coming from the prophet, it was actually God ruling. God was the king up to 1 Samuel, the 8th chapter. The Bible says that over and over again. Particularly in 1 Samuel, the 12th chapter, God was your king. And Samuel tells the people in the 8th chapter when they say, give us a man king, we don't want God being king. Well, when the people asked Samuel for a king, he says, God was your king. Why do you want a man to be your king? Because you're going to end up having armories, and you're going to have chariots, and you're going to have all these spears and swords in the armories. And God is your king, and He's got an armory that can't be compared to. He's got a sky full of lightning bolts, a ground full of earthquakes and volcanoes and tidal waves in the sea that He'll destroy the enemies of God with. Why do you need a man to be king of it? We want a man. Give us a king. God said, I'll give you a king. And He picked out the wrong king. He picked out a man from the wrong tribe, and that was Saul, and he came out of Benjamin. Now, God did the picking. The people didn't do the picking, but God says, when He picked out Saul, you'll read a portion there where He will say, behold the king whom ye have chosen. That's what Samuel says to the people. It doesn't mean that they picked out the man. They picked out the fact that they wanted a king, and God says, the king will come by my instruction, and it will be this man Saul. Well, when it's Saul of the tribe of Benjamin, over there in Genesis, the 49th chapter, Jacob is about to die. And the Bible says it came time that Israel must die. Jacob's name was changed to Israel in the 32nd chapter of Genesis. And his name was changed to Israel, and it came time for him to die, and he called his 12 sons around him and said, I'm going to bring particular blessings on you. And you can go to the 49th chapter of Genesis, and you can start with Reuben. Reuben was unstable as water, God says. So therefore, Jacob says he will not inherit Israel. So God crosses out Reuben, his firstborn, Reuben. Well, if the firstborn, he being unstable and not doing the righteousness of God, God switches the inheritance from Reuben to who? No, Joseph. Switches it to Joseph. Now, Levi had an inheritance. Now, Joseph was the 11th born of Jacob. Reuben was the firstborn. And the firstborn was going to be the priesthood. Priesthood. And he would have the inheritance of all of his father's goods. And the Jews had a custom that one son would inherit everything. One son. And that would be the firstborn in this case. Well, what God did, He not only took the inheritance away from Reuben, He took the priesthood away from Reuben, and He bypasses Simeon. Simeon, the secondborn, was a bloody man. He was a man of war. He was a man that just didn't let anything hold him back. When his sister Dinah was, you thought that was the name of a singer, didn't you? But when his sister Dinah was molested by Shechem, a Canaanite, it was Simeon that said, in his sinister ways, he said, we'll tell the men of Shechem, we want you to become our brothers if you're going to marry our sister. But you have to be circumcised as it is according to the covenant of God if you're going to marry our sister. And they said, all right, we're willing to do that. And the king of Shechem said, yeah, we'll be circumcised. So after they were circumcised, while all the men were weak, when they couldn't move, Simeon said, let's go kill him now. Oh, man, what a trickster. Well, Simeon, him to be the inheritance or the priesthood. So God bypassed him, and God picked out Levi, the thirdborn of Jacob, to be the priesthood. Priesthood. And Levi had 3 sons. He had Gershon, Merari. Let me put Merari on the end.